Symmone, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on.
That's my absolute pleasure. So today we're going to learn a bit about you and specifically the piece of technology sitting behind you, which I was introduced to recently. So to tee this up as an introduction, Loz and I, we had something called an EE Cube in our sitting room for about 4 weeks, which you helped us install. And as part of the process, I met you and I thought the story was really awesome and wanted to get you on the podcast as a result. So Symmone, for those people that won't know who you are, first of all, give us a bit of a background on who you are and what your business is, and then start teaching us about how you got into the EE Cube.
Well, who I am, that's such a
huge question.
big question.
Well, why don't we start with this? How did you get interested in EE Cubes?
It was intuitive, actually. I have always wanted to create a retreat center, but definitely with a point of difference that aligns with heart-centered focus around the changing world and the acceleration of consciousness. So it wasn't just going to be any normal retreat center. It was going to embody frequency technology. It was going to embody biophilic design, sacred geometry, water features, practitioners that were of more of a new age, combining mind, body, spirit, but in such a way in which the totality of the human was always to be witnessed, always to be worked with. And my own experience, having been at retreat centers, having been in the healing industry, as well as other industries, because I'm more of a business. I love business. I love creating new businesses. I saw that there was a shortfall in being able to integrate the esoteric with the emotional, with the physical, and with nature. And so for quite a number of years, I've been plotting and planning to create the healing realm. And when the EE system, which is now going to be rebranded as TLS, the light system.
Okay.
When this came on board a few years ago through Jason Shirker, it was just an instant, yes, we're going in that direction. This is the beginning of the path. So
cool. It's funny as well, isn't it? How sometimes you just know that that's what I'm going to do. And there's no faffing around. And it makes you realize how much procrastination happens on decisions that just don't need to be made. You know what I mean? Like hours, just like, oh, should I do that? Should I not? And then actually really pivotal decisions, just like, yeah, I did it. Okay, and so let's dive into the TLS. So I knew this as an EE Cube. For people who are watching rather than listening, there is now a TLS sitting right behind you, I believe. But I was really drawn to this idea as the story goes, or at least the story I was told, was a book that was written around affirmations and the power of affirmations. So let's start there and take us through how this thing's developed.
Okay, so this system, just to the affirmations is a very powerful component of what you're seeing in the background here, even though it looks like colored squibbly bits.
Yeah, like a screensaver from the 90s. Yeah.
Yeah. And it actually has a prolific function in which as soon as you get into the field that's generated by this one and 3 others, which are equidistant from one another and creating a toroidal field, you become coherent. But the way it actually works with light, because light is absorbed by the body, we actually communicate in light. Our cells communicate in light. Our DNA communicates in light, which causes biochemical reactions throughout the body, which causes all the physicality that is measured by the medical system. But coming back to light, we're looking at different colors in the background, as you can see, which is a kind of chromotherapy. So light is being absorbed and information that's coming through the light is being registered by the body and the body is reacting to it in a positive way. That's one of the first principles. There's another one called photonic collision where we have the light that's emanating. So imagine hoses that are coming out of these screens and they're bombarding against one another, especially in the center of the room, and creating an electrical charge. And which, again, our cells become coherent to millivoltage. Now, optimally, a cell will function at minus 20 to 25 millivolts, but when the cell has to regenerate, we're looking at about 50 millivolts to then 70 to 90 millivolts where there's a complete regeneration occurring. So this photonic collision part of it, which also produces heat as a byproduct, is very pivotal in people when they come in here and start to feel something is going on. The body is starting to react and regenerate based on its coherence to an electrical charged field. Then we have the sacred geometry aspect that we're seeing that's scrolling up and down. It looks like it's really weird, wonky writing going across. That's purposely done, and sacred geometry again aligns with the harmonious aspects of the body that wants to come into balance. And sacred geometry you can see everywhere in the world, such as a sunflower with the Fibonacci code. And the Fibonacci code and the spiral is what you would call an element of sacred geometry, but you also get it in various shapes like the triangle or a circle or a Metatron shape. So we have the sacred geometry aspect that is part of that scrolling going up and down, and then Fibonacci sequencing that's also part of that scrolling going up and down in a timing sequence. We also have the affirmations, coming back to your original question about affirmations and how they work. So lots of people would be familiar with Dr. Emoto's work, where he discovered that when you speak beautifully to water, it forms a crystallized structure that is just magnificent to observe. Now, the same thing happens when you have life positive affirmations, which are actually scrolling up and down the screen in what's called a metametrics language. And that's because it's light, it's being absorbed by the body. So there's things like love is all, you are part of the grand design, all there is love, and you are unified with all that is creation, etc., etc. There's a whole heap of affirmations in there. And as soon as you are kind of being bombarded by these affirmations through the photonic light that's coming through the screens, your body will react and it will start to structure cells in accordance with the energy that is being projected upon it. When that happens, energy can flow more clearly, cleanly, succinctly through the body. It's as if the meridians open up into their, fullest of capacity. And then Dr. Emoto also experimented with when you project hate onto water or some form of judgment or dislike, and the water crystal or the water molecule actually disintegrates. And I think most of your audience would be familiar with seeing snowflakes and all the different patterns there are to snowflakes, including cylinder patterns. And again, when you look at these snowflakes and all their different patterning, the snowflakes are responding to the resonance of its environment and the energy of which it is situated in. We are no different. When we are placed in an environment that's full of love, our bodies, which are mostly water, are going to react to that structure and thereby house the energy that is conducive for our well-being and optimizing health. So that's basically how this system works, with 5 core principles, all creating a field of energy in which when you step into it via coherence, via like a synchronization, you too begin to actually morph into that which you have stepped into. And another example of that would be, we all know what it's like to be perhaps around somebody who's draining, or perhaps around radiation, or perhaps around a 5G tower. This is discordant, incoherent energy, which affects the body in negative ways. And I don't have to go into the detail of it, because there's just so much information now about what this discordant energy does to the body and how people are becoming so EMF sensitized in a bad way to discordant energies. So basically, this is the opposite of what it provides to actually create the impetus for the body to heal itself, for the emotional body to become into alignment, and for the spiritual expansion of one's intuitive abilities. So I see all sorts of things occurring in this room when people come into it, depending on where they are in their journey.
Gosh, Symmone, you explained that brilliantly. It's funny, the conversation we had in the sitting room downstairs is translating brilliantly to a podcast arena, and somehow I knew that would happen. So thank you for taking us through all that. it's wild what you're explaining. And in some cases, I think that people, it's like that phrase, like when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And a lot of people out there are just not willing to even go there when it comes to the kind of things you just touched on. And what I mean by that being, there's different types of snow. Snow is essentially water. Water can be different. People are like, what do you mean? Water's just water. But those are the same people that are probably drinking tap water, sitting underneath a 5G tower, and think they're absolutely fine. And they're not. And the problem with compounding inflammation over time is it becomes disease, but it's not immediately obvious. So one concrete example of people using the technology that you're advocating for is my mother-in-law. So shout out to Suze. She was is on a breast cancer journey, and she started using, I think it's a physical room she was going to in Melbourne somewhere. You go in and you just sit there for 2 hours or something with the ambience, with the TLS around you. So I think if you're in your sitting room now, you've got 3 of them, right? In each corner. 4, 1 in each corner.
Yeah.
So, okay. So a TV session, you've got these things going, which is awesome. But we had one set up in the bedroom, and I was in bed with all my kids sleeping, in between like waking up with a baby and putting it back to sleep. And the light was very bright, and it wasn't quite right to sleep with, but it then sat in the sitting room with us for a month. And honestly, I don't know personally what effects it have, but I would love to understand, first of all, for yourself, like how different do you feel as a result of being in and around this kind of healing technology? And what are some of the results you've seen in other people?
Well, I'll start by saying that there's been a number of different reactions to the system. So I'll describe some of the people's experiences. So just recently, I had a woman who had difficulty speaking her truth. Like, she was always shut down as a child and felt that she didn't matter. So what happened after she came into the system is that she started becoming more angry and more pronounced in wanting to speak up, but there was anger associated with it. And then, I would work with her because part of my background is as a healer and an astrologer and a clairvoyant and a counselor. So I'm working with people to really get them to see and make sense of what is being illuminated before them. And so as she got angry and as all this stuff was coming up, she got tonsillitis. And the tonsillitis was the expression of the suppressed, buried emotions that were coming through around her not being able to articulate or speak without being shut down. After that, she had no problem speaking. She let go of people who no longer resonated with her, which is something that does tend to happen.
Yeah.
I have another lady who has breast cancer, and again, I can't make any claims. I'm going to say that the body heals itself, and these are just shares around their experience. But she's noted that there's a lot of pain that's coming through her left breast. And this is very indicative based on other centers around the world, that when they have people with the C word, that a pain starts to emanate. And we see that as a part of the healing process, where oxygen, or perhaps where nutrients, or where there is a change that is occurring in the breast tissue or in the area in question. And so she's in the process actually of having this occur. I had another lady who had a stroke, and she received more energy. She was more vital. She was jumping around a lot more. Then I had another lady who, after she had a couple of car accidents, and her body was quite, shall we say, wrecked, with a number of different physio and different medical interventions that she had gone to in order to try and alleviate pain. She had come to the system for probably about 5 sessions, and the pain alleviated, but not before the pain actually intensified 24 hours later and then was gone. So there were layers to it as she kept on coming back into the system for another round of letting go, because there was a number of emotional issues or buried emotions that were associated with this accident as well. I could keep on going on and on about the people and the change.
I already have a question, so if I may just jump in for a second, Symmone. I think the trend here is clear, and I recently had my friend Sarah on, who's our homeopath, and she talked about helping the vital force.
Yeah.
And this is very similar, i.e., if you can help nature point in the right direction, the healing happens itself.
Yes.
And that's the wonderful thing. Whereas the opposite to that is the intervention, right? So whether it be, heavy doses of chemicals with the chemotherapy option with cancer, or whether it be literally surgery, so getting things chopped off, these are heavy interventions that often after like a specific time period, like they'll tell you chemo works, but the time frame was 4.5 years. And the amount of people that end up having to have chemotherapy again within a decade is absolutely massive. And you start looking at the statistics, you're like, well, hang on. So really all you're doing is delaying things by 5 years. You're not actually healing. And so it's this idea of like, most often the traditional health system, in my experience, is very good at putting band-aids on problems, but doesn't get to the root cause. Whereas what you're describing is people who are right out there on the kind of alternative curve. The people with breast cancer going and sitting with one of these machines, most people will be like, you're completely mad. What are you doing? But to me, it seems pretty obvious that they're just trying to connect with nature. And if they do that effectively, then they heal. And would you say that's true? Not to try and put words in your mouth, but like that for me really resonates. Is like, I don't know, just letting nature do its thing, but in a more optimal way.
Well, yes, the body is a biological system in which it knows how to survive because it has all the mechanisms in place to allow it to thrive. Unless, of course, you ingest poison or you place yourself in very negative environments, in which case then by coherence, it's going to be affected. But if one has a lifestyle, a really healthy lifestyle, and continues to look at change or not getting to a level of stagnation or deal with trauma and, find means in which to release trauma, then the body has a means to repair itself constantly. It's only when the mind interferes with the body's processes, or we have external environmental toxins that interfere with the body's processes, that the body has a very difficult time in repairing itself. And your point to homeopathics, I mean, I find homeopathics brilliant. I mean, they work on the premise again of allowing the body to heal itself through introducing compounds in which are of similar nature to the symptoms that are presenting, in order to cancel out the symptoms through, just through a cancellation process. I won't go into it in depth, but in the same way, this system will bring about a higher level frequency in order for the body to basically become coherent with, so that it may heal itself. Slightly different mechanism than the homeopathics, but we're going to the core root of the issue. So whatever it may be, whether it's a past life, which I've seen occur as well, or whether it's early childhood conditioning trauma related, or whether it's an accident, or whether it's a physical inflammation that's occurred over a period of time. And dare I say, I'm working with quite a few vaccine injured people as well. I don't even know I should be using that word vaccine, because it's not.
You can go for it. Absolutely.
We're working with, what has been done to the body as a result of those injections, and getting amazing results, because as soon as we allow these toxins to detoxify, the body starts to heal itself. And we're doing that a lot via voltage, and we're doing that via light, and we're doing that via affirmation. So there's a number of different things that are going into lifting the body's frequency. And as soon as the body starts raising its own frequency, nothing dense can remain. Theoretically, but that's also been proven as well, that think of oil and water. If you shake up oil and water, and just imagine that's the body with a mixture of trauma and a mixture of different negative things that have occurred through life. Well, let's look at the EE system, or the TLS, as a means in which to separate the oil and the water, and then to be able to diffuse or to eliminate, say, the oil component, which shouldn't belong, and now has a means in which to move out of the body.
So cool. And you can get the same effect in a sense from meditation or from a number of different areas where you're playing around with the frequency you're at. And to wind back to something you mentioned earlier about how happy words rise or raise your frequency and unhappy words lower them. And for example, I had a really funny experience recently where I won't give too many details away, but let's just say there was a guy at the end of my driveway yesterday who threw his middle finger up at me and said, "When the hell are you getting out of here?" And he's someone that I fell out with over something completely pointless and not even worth mentioning. But to me, he's deeply unhappy. And that was expressed in a entertaining end of driveway experience. But that is just really low level, angry, pathetic, sad energy that if you let it drag you down, takes you down with it. And so it has to just, I mean, for me, I'm having to just laugh it off essentially. As much as like you might want to go and find this guy and, punch them. But the point here is that like you're playing with frequency and it's your choice often where that frequency goes. And then there are tools like the one you're advocating for that can also supercharge that. Let's take myself. If I wanted to get more exposure to the TLS, do you buy one and have it at home? Or are there places you can go and get the exposure that you need?
Well, the commercial size system, which I've got a 12-unit system and it comes in larger sizes than that, is more for people to come and visit. So the healing realm, we have that. You come in, you sit, and there's a number of other services as well. But if you wanted to, you could buy the pyramid, which is on offer, and it is an in-house, beautiful looking system in which does everything except for the photonic collision. So you could get those benefits, and you yourself had the cube, which is a different shape and nonetheless does the same thing.
Mm.
And that's more of a domestic use, less
Okay.
powerful, but still we have found that when people have the cube or the pyramid, there is definite change. There is, whether emotions come up that need to be purged or whether there's physical healing that occurs as a result of the body healing itself in proximity to the pyramid or the cube.
Interesting. Okay. And that's something that my wife and I will definitely have to look into. I want to ask, like, just to play devil's advocate for a moment, the idea of encoding written word into picture graphics, like what are behind you, or imagery. What if they haven't encoded what they said they've encoded? And what if you're being like beamed a a script that you're not quite aware of?
You mean like watching TV, having blue light
like watching Channel
constantly
7.
program the brain into being really passive and dumbed
You're
down?
absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh, it's so true, isn't it? That 2 hours I spent watching Netflix the other night, it was exactly that.
Well, do it with awareness and you'll be fine. But you raise a really good question. So we can translate the metametrics, which looks like gibberish, we can translate that into English by pressing a couple of keys, and you can see all of the positive affirmations.
Cool.
Now, the inventor, Robert Regular, he put it, you could try and put in something really detrimental or like a program in which to, I don't know, control you for whatever reason, for what end, I don't know. But the system will not allow you to program anything negative. It will revert and change it to positive, no matter what you're attempting to do by
Cool.
influencing the people.
Interesting. So obviously that's been thought about and in theory engineered away, which I love. Okay, cool. And so something else we touched on, Symmone, that I'd love to learn more about is, so I'm currently living in Byron Bay, and you started teaching me about ley lines, and just I'd love to learn more about that, just to keep a very open question.
Okay, so think of ley lines as energetic acupuncture meridians that are crisscrossing all over the planet. So the planet herself has like an arterial system or a vascular system in which energy is potently run through specific lines that I don't understand exactly how they come about, but they can shift. And they are detected through dowsing, one of the main areas. But I'm sure there's other equipment now that can very much detect where ley lines are are based. In Byron specifically, there is a number of ley lines that are coming together, especially at a place called the Pass. And as a result of that, the energetics are very much healing in nature, whereas you can get some ley lines in other parts of the world that can be quite negative or have a different effect. Like I've been to different places of the world, such as a place in Uganda in Rakai, where the ley lines there were so heavy and detrimental, and the community that was living there, you could see that it was just really dense and really hard to break out of, shall we say, like a mental constrictive
Wow.
container. Whereas a place like Byron is known for its healing and feminine energy of transformation. So coming back to ley lines, as they're crisscrossing all over the world, you'll notice that there are specific points in the world where you'll have sacred temples, pyramids. There's a place in the UK, for example, not Bath. Oh, I've just forgotten.
Stonehenge, maybe.
Yeah, well, Stonehenge definitely has ley lines, but they're being created and harnessed with the stones to create like portals, energetic portals, which are associated with the electromagnetic field of the planet and of the sun, to bring about higher clarity and information that is connected to source. So you can create very specific destinations where there are churches, temples, pyramids. I mean, it's no surprise there are pyramids in various locations around the world, and they are extremely potent in their ability to allow human consciousness to access other dimensions or gather other information that allows expandedness of one's own knowledge and also expandedness of one's own consciousness.
I like living here in Byron. We started talking about like how I ended up here and why you like living around here, and hence the conversation about ley lines came up. And I don't quite know ultimately what drew us here, but I've since picked up, and admittedly this is very kind of like proper pub chat, because I can't find any specific sources that I can be like, oh, that truly makes sense. But the Aboriginal communities that lived here would come and give birth in and around Byron, and then continue like the nomadic tribes that they were. And we've turned up here, had a baby, and I don't know if like some of the things that are coming up are like, well, now it's time to move on, or to double down and be like, I really like this place, and this is where I would like to bring up my family, so to speak. But when I hear about things like that, I'm like, how on earth did I end up on the most eastern tip of Australia, having grown up in the UK? And I don't know how, if it's because my frequency's been raising, because I've actually been able to sit down and work on that, and it's like opened up this new part of life that I didn't see before. And meeting people like yourself. Do you see like real world impact from choosing to live in and around a place like Byron because of the energetics? Or is it just something that is useful to be aware of?
Such a good question, because people usually move, or I find gravitate to where the land is resonating with a particular consciousness, which of course will be influenced by the consciousness of the people and integrate with the land. So it becomes a bit of a merged, changing landscape of people and consciousness of land to create a particular signature. And Byron's always been known as a transient kind of location where Indigenous have come in and out of it, but not really stayed permanently. I mean, that's what I've heard. And so wherever one is, I guess, being, and again, this is my opinion, it's not, fact, but wherever one is being drawn to tends to be for a rhyme and a reason, especially when you've got places, say, for instance, like Byron Bay, or maybe it's somewhere in the Northern Territory, or places of high level change or transformational signatures. When someone is ready to go to that higher level, the place will call. And when there is more change or more transformation that is going on within that individual, then they perhaps may be called to a different location where they are compatible with the resonance of the earth or the land in which they're to create anew or to do something else than they were doing previously. So it's just a means of being aware of whenever one is called to a different location, it's usually associated with a different identity. Uh, Changes happen to such a huge degree that the place that was holding being a container for that individual no longer resonates, and then thereby they can no longer stay.
Mm. Interesting. And I want to touch on that last word, resonates, because that seems to be something that's kind of threaded throughout this conversation. But essentially, we can play with our resonation. And when surrounded by, I mean, we talked about 5G already. Some people would say we're completely mental for talking about 5G, even remotely being a problem. But my wife and I were studying something recently about the connection between 5G and mold, and the frequency that is coming out of these like radio transmitters for 5G is so aggressive that the mold gets upset by it and it reacts. And so there is mold in buildings all throughout the world that is being like made much worse due to the use of 5G. But the point is these are unnatural frequencies being pumped all over the surface of the earth in an what's the right way of saying it? An intervention, basically. One of the answers to this that I came across, had this great guy, Alan, came to the house and he was doing EMF testing. And even like outside right here, we've got some electricity pylons within 5 meters of the house. And the EMFs coming off them are strong enough that inside the bedrooms, he said you shouldn't sleep in those beds because you're getting pumped with EMF all night. And so we had a problem with mold in the house. We had a problem with EMF in the house. These are all frequencies. And then also the negative externalities of frequencies that shouldn't be there. Are there from the human touch? So what can we do to protect ourselves from those things? One of the suggestions Alan made, for example, is you can put a certain type of paint on the wall in the bedroom. So at nighttime, you can make sure that you're encapsulated from some of these things. The TLS is obviously another option, but has anything in particular worked for you, and what should we be most aware of?
This is such a big topic. It may be another podcast.
Well, we can do another one in a few months' time, no problem.
Okay, so first I'll address the mold. It's been proven that mold is activated to grow and proliferate with EMFs. They may be at particular frequencies or different hertz, but it's been proven. So we are definitely having a mold issue, and I myself, have, and I'm seeing it more and more. But myself, I've been testing my blood with live blood analysis, and I was riddled with mold. Wow. The only reason my live blood analysis, pointed out to me, why aren't you with chronic fatigue, or how are you getting out of bed? And I said, it's got to be the system that I'm in, because it's counteracting the effects. It wasn't killing the mold, but it was counteracting the effects. Yeah. So from the mold perspective, I would encourage anyone, like, first and foremost, go and get a live blood analysis or some means of being able to see whether mold is we did a urine test infiltrating
as well, just to see if it was in her. Yeah.
Right. And by doing that, then you can take the next steps in order to protect your body from that infiltration. Then the second step would be, how do you clear the mold, or how do you clean up the EMFs? I'm not an expert on how to clean up EMFs out of the house. I mean, one of them is, clay-based paints, for example, or there are other
you get
structures,
mats and stuff that go under the bed, and
you
can switch off. We were switching off the mains, literally having like black part of the house and things like that.
Yeah, things to cover the smart meter, or you're putting your phone in a Faraday bag, or there's various means. But the bombardment of 5G, which may go to 6G, 7G, who knows, is part of a much bigger picture when we start to talk about why is this artificial frequency being allowed to bombard the human body and the earth, when the earth has such a magnificent natural resonance in the Schumann's resonance, which is 7.83, which is actually spiking and fluctuating, but nonetheless is a natural, coherent frequency in which we are aligned to as biological creatures. What would be the reason for the artificial frequencies invading our houses, invading our bodies? And that's a much bigger answer to give you, that is associated with, again, what is in the blood currently and those injections.
And let's go there. I'm like anyone. What the hell is going on in the world today? I've got 3 young kids. I want them to live in the happiest and healthiest place they possibly can. But could it be the case that there's a concerted effort to depopulate the world? Could it be the case that the COVID-19 drama that unfolded was used as a way to make people sick and unhealthy? I mean, some mad data coming out at the moment around the amount of stillborns that have increased since 2021. It was Dave Asprey posted something just yesterday, who, you can question him all you like, but he's done plenty of years of research into what alternative health might look like and true health. And it's terrifying how many people are having either stillborn kids or are having miscarriages. So there's a lot of questions to be asked. Where do you go when it comes to this?
All right. Well, let's kind of, jump right into it, and let's hope there's no censorship around this.
Well, there might be. And if we get shadow banned, we get shadow banned. So be it.
Okay. So we're talking about synthetic biology and nanotechnology, which has been placed into the injections. And I'm not just saying this as make believe. I've tested my own blood. I've got the proof. I've seen it in the blood. I've seen it in other people's blood through researchers and doctors all over the world who are blowing the whistle and doing the much needed exposing of actually what has been in these injections. I mean, Dr. David Nixon is one of them. Dr. Anna Mihiteha, I think I've pronounced her name correctly. There is Dr. Anita Baxter. There's a number of different, Dr. Brian Ardis, Dr. Edward Group. There's a number of different doctors who are very much on the forefront of understanding what has been going on in this perpetration against the human race. So I'll kind of try and summarize it. But when nanotechnology is in the blood, one, it will have the effect of creating chronic inflammation. There's no surprise, I think, to many of your viewers, how many people have died suddenly.
Turbo cancer.
And turbo cancers, but strokes or heart attacks, cardiac arrests, and nothing to see here. I think it's called SAD, sudden adult death syndrome. Then we have, as you mentioned, the stillbirths, because the nanotechnology actually congregates, from what the research I've seen, congregates specifically in the reproductive organs in order to cause sterilization. So we're seeing men's sperm counts completely drop. We're seeing the stillbirths because obviously the baby can't come to term. We're seeing, as I said before, the turbo cancers. We are seeing cognitive, like a kind of dissonance where fogginess, people report no longer being connected to their hearts or source energy. We are seeing, obviously, a depopulation agenda as associated with this. But the other side of this is transhumanism. And how does that transhumanism work with nanotechnology? I mean, what are the links? Well, in short, the nanotechnology is creating an intra-body network based on hydrogel, based on nanobots, all building infrastructure within the body to relay information and receive information. And that is being done by artificial frequencies, i.e. 5G, and your phone is a gateway to that. Now, I mean, again, lots of evidence. It's not anything I'm making up. I mean, I actually do talks on this in order to educate people on what is in the blood and how one can detoxify from it. I'll just throw it out here now. EDTA, Dr. Ed Group, Global Healing is something that's been recommended by a couple of doctors, and seeing it, under the microscope, having a detrimental effect, shall we say, on nanotechnology, which is a good thing. But there are a number of other detoxification protocols that can be used in order to help people detoxify from this. But first, they need to know that it's in the blood. But if you've got artificial frequencies that are constantly bombarding the human body And it has the effect of suppressing our natural frequency. And if it suppresses our natural frequency so that we can't feel or we can't hear or connect to source in a way which allows us to be just human, then what is being relayed to us? And so the information shows, well, again, the patents that are out there, the information that I've been reading and doing a lot of research on is the neural network of the brain is it's like it's being replaced with nanotechnology to feed in artificial memories and artificial, well, emotions to entrain the brain to behave in a particular way.
Wow.
Now, this may sound like science fiction, but it's what the CIA, it's what MK Ultra, it's what has been worked on for a long time now in order to, I guess, perfect it in relation to how to control human behavior. It's being controlled by light because part of the nanotechnology is using light optics within the system. And it's using hydrogel, which is usually non-detectable by the body. The body doesn't know what to do with it to actually cast it out. And I'm sure a number of your viewers would have also seen documentaries such as Died Suddenly, where they're pulling out these very weird looking clots out of the vascular system of dead people, on the autopsy table. So all of this can be correlated. It's just joining the dots and bringing it into the awareness of people so that they can actually understand what is being perpetrated against the human race. But at the same time, and so I don't want to be so I'll preface this by saying this is not about fear mongering, not at all. This is about awareness and bringing understanding to what is actually occurring to the human body. And at the same time, it's a catalyst. I mean, that's my spiritual opinion here. It's a catalyst because when you're aware of what is occurring to you, then you have a choice to act and not consent. You have a choice to take a different road. You have a choice not to necessarily fight and oppose, but to create a different reality around how you want to live your life. So the nanotechnology and what is being perpetrated against the human race, and again with new financial system trying to be implemented, CBDCs, for example, digital currency, a kind of new form of enslavement, is all correlated to the nanotechnology and enslaving the human race from the perspective of a level of brainwashing, which if we only have to look at our televisions and the blue screens and the brain entrainment that was like a beta testing on how people could be moved into complacency or moved into a sense of apathy. So there's a number of different things I could go into as to how that works with the brain and how people can be led into giving their power away. But the whole point of this process is to awaken humanity to reclaim their power, to step back into their sovereignty and step back into a level of recreation that is at everyone's fingertips, that they can actually enact without being controlled or enslaved in a system that would have you believe that it is only one ideology and that is all. So
Yeah, trust the experts, or like you don't believe in science. You get these ridiculous comments. I'm an advocate for freedom of speech. So earlier when you said, "Oh, I'm not sure if I should even call it a vaccine," what came to me initially was like people are even worried about talking about vaccines, right? It's got to that point where it's like, am I allowed to say it? Am I not allowed to say it? Now, actually, what you were referring to was the fact that what we called a vaccine in 1980 is not what's in the jab today. And
right.
that is absolutely on point, right? So they're playing around with things that haven't been played with ever before. And well, we could do like 10 podcasts on what the hell happened there. Something that's resonating to me now as I think about it, having had a question on how the affirmations were encoded into graphics, is an experience I had in Melbourne during the lockdowns. Ruby was maybe 6 months old. My wife and I went to a bunch of freedom rallies in the center of
Yeah.
Melbourne. And at the time, they had these crazy lockdown rules in place, like you're not allowed to be more than 5 kilometers from your front door. You're only allowed outside the house for essential things like going to the grocery store. And we witnessed supposedly the right to protest your government was still allowed, but they had this catch-all chief health officer set of regulations that based on health reasons, you couldn't do that. The freedom to movement removed, the freedom to say no or protest removed. Melbourne became a police state. We witnessed it with our own eyes. And we went to one of these protests and there were thousands of people there. I saw this, right? And that night on Channel 7 and Channel 9 News, talk about like encoding things into image, hundreds of protesters were causing a disruption in, Flinders Street Station. It's like, wow. I saw 10 times that amount. And you talk about like playing with people's brains and their perception of the world. And the next morning, amusingly, we had a lactation consultant or a sleep coach or something come to the house to try and help us with the baby's sleep. Who was like, oh, all these protesters yesterday were out in the middle of town. Like, how dangerous. And you're like, well, we better not tell her that we were there. Oh, wow. Okay, sorry. So I want to try to answer the question that you posed to me before we click record. If we go a little over, so be it. But you wanted to ask me about Bitcoin, so fire away.
Yeah. So in relation to what I was talking about with the new enslavement system, which would be CBDCs, which is digital currency or digital
central bank digital
central banking digital currency. Sorry, it's a mouthful. So Bitcoin is touted as a decentralized currency and digital gold. So I'm wondering, with the banks buying it up or hedge funds buying it up and it being the next best thing since sliced bread, and then XRP also being touted as the next level of currency to be used by the general public, get in while you can, kind of FOMO messaging that's going on. What's your take on XRP and Bitcoin whilst being on a blockchain and supposedly decentralized? Is it really, or is it moving towards trying to entrap people in programmable CBDC type digital currency down the track?
Mm-hmm. Brilliant question. So this is classic. Answer in 3 minutes, Jake. So I've spent the last 5 years studying Bitcoin, really deeply. And I first bought some in 2015, sold some 2016, sold some 2017. 2020 comes around, and I then realized it's actually the best investment I'd ever owned. It sat in self-custody the whole time. No one can take it from me. There's a fixed supply of 21 million. You cannot be debased in the same way that an Aussie dollar or a euro or a pound can be. And it was the best investment I'd already ever made. And then I saw stock-listed companies putting it onto their balance sheets and calling them corporate treasuries. And since the last 5 years, the Bitcoin space specifically has just exploded. And the pace of adoption of Bitcoin specifically is faster than the internet. And I've been and traveled to places like Bali. I went to the Indonesian Bitcoin conference and was an MC there. There are people in Indonesia, people in Malaysia, people in Singapore, people in Vietnam with broken financial systems. The Philippines, something like 1.4 billion people globally are completely unbanked. And they're unbanked because they don't have passports, they don't have driver's license. They cannot access the financial system. So for me, the most important thing to do is ask the question, what is money? And that takes you down a history lesson. So money to me now is, first of all, if you take that history lesson, we used to use glass beads, we used to use shells, we used to use certain types of stones. It eventually evolved into commodity money. So we would use gold or silver or bronze. And in the last 100 or so years, that's then moved into what we now call fiat currency. And so when you ask the question, what is money? Money typically has a set of characteristics that make a good money. So is it durable? Is it divisible? Is it portable? Is it scarce? And there's a whole library, essentially, of economic study on that question, what is money? And money, to me, is something that rises from the free market and is something that anyone can choose. So I could try and use this water bottle as money, but actually it's quite difficult to send to you right now in cyberspace. And it's also very easy to replicate. So that's actually not a very good money. Or I could try and use grain. Well, grain, it perishes quite quickly. So that's actually not very good store of value over time. Or I could try and use this chair, or I could try and use humans. Like, you could use anything as money, but certain things seem to rise to the top of the marketplace as the best types of money. In my opinion, gold is the best form of money that's ever been used. And gold failed. And gold failed because it's good at storing value over time, but not sending it across space. So how do you chop up a gold bar? You can't very easily chop it up, right? To try and draw a conclusion to it, the Bitcoin is the latest iteration of humans looking for something that is a good money. And so money solves the double coincidence of wants problem. I.e., when we traded apples and oranges, or the back leg of a deer that I just got, or you fished a fish, if you want a 1-for-1 trade, great. But what happens if you actually only want half a fish, or you only want the hoof of the cow? It doesn't work. So money is something that rose as a technology to solve the problem of double coincidence of wants. And there's then the school of Austrian economics that you can go and study. And like a guy called Karl Menger was writing about the origins of money, late 1800s in Vienna. It's a massive, massive subject. And so to me, in that history lesson of like gold, silver, before that beads, then into modern currency like the euro or the pound or the yen, Bitcoin is the latest iteration of that. And to me is the future base layer of the financial system. The reason I know it's decentralized is because I can go and look at the blockchain. I can see how many nodes are being operated globally. And I know that it hasn't changed in terms of its rule set for 15 years. That gives me great confidence that it's the future of money. You mentioned XRP. That is a altcoin. XRP, Ethereum, Polkadot, they are all highly speculative software projects that are basically recreating what a central bank does. And to give you an analogy to what we touched on in terms of using nature to help the body heal, to me, Bitcoin is backed by energy. So you have to use real world resources to mine Bitcoin to get paid for calculating the transactions. XRP, euros, pounds, they are basically things that can just be printed whenever they want. So the guy that runs XRP, he can change the algorithm whenever he wants. He can change the blockchain whenever he wants. He can issue more of these things whenever he wants. It is a well-dressed, highly marketed scam that I would never recommend anyone puts any money into. And I focus entirely on Bitcoin. Basically, Bitcoin's the closest thing to nature we have seen when it comes to money. And things like XRP are a heavy intervention that papers over the problem and actually creates more. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Oh,
That was a
real rant,
that was a
wasn't it? 5 minutes.
that was a really great explanation. Just another question to that is that XRP. Okay, so you're basically saying it's been marketed to be the best thing since sliced bread, but it's not. Is it something that could be converted into a programmable currency in which to control people, say, with a social credit system?
What you're asking about XRP specifically?
Yeah, XRP specifically, or anything that.
I don't know, but the evolution of the central bank digital currency proposals are at different stages with different countries, and it's a really interesting discussion. The truth is, in my mind, like, they're already kind of doing it, right? So the money printing, whether they call it quantitative easing, whether they call it stimulus, even here in Australia, the Royal Bank of Australia they're printing money, and they're doing it literally with like the click of a button on a keypad. So in some ways, it's already digital, right?
Yeah.
And therefore, like, CBDC, like programmable money, yes, in theory, it would be much worse for them to have complete control of the currency you're using, i.e. you use too much carbon, now we're going to stop you from spending any money. Or look, you weren't supposed to be in that part of the country, now we're going to stop you from spending money. But let's be honest, there's already real world examples of extreme financial repression, even in supposedly liberal Western democracies, such as the Canadian Freedom Truckers rally,
Yes.
where people were sending them Bitcoin and sending them donations through platforms like GoFundMe. and the Canadian government just shut them down. So they froze their bank accounts. And why wouldn't the Australian government do that, right? Let's say there was some other spurious disease that sprung up. The chief health officers again rose to the challenge and put all these big enforcement laws in. And suddenly they're like, you were spending money in somewhere that's this far from your home where your registered address is. Right, Westpac's closing your account. They could already do that if they wanted to. I didn't touch on this earlier, but money to me does three things, which is a store of value, a medium of exchange, and a unit of account. And the money that we inherited was pure fiat currency since 1971 when the US dollar was taken off the gold standard. So we've never had a money that exhibited the feature store of value because they're printing more and more of it. Each year, your $10 buys you less stuff. So really how you have to look at every investment you ever make is through the lens of purchasing power. So if you invest into this thing, whether it is Aussie dollars, whether it is gold, whether it is Bitcoin, will you have more purchasing power a year from now or less? And so it's about re-engineering your lens. And in a world in which Bitcoin does all three of those things, it is then able to receive money, send money, and store money. And you don't need to have anything except for an internet connection. So if you have an internet connection, you can sign up, get a Bitcoin wallet, and you can start send, receive, and store value. And it's completely outside of the digitized banking system that already exists. And so it is permissionless peer-to-peer money. And in my mind, it's about the most important technology innovation at our fingertips today that it couldn't come at a better time. Like how dystopian the world is becoming. You can't say certain things online. You got to put certain stuff in your body to comply with the government. You can't go to certain places because you said the wrong thing or you didn't do the right thing according to the health officer. It's wild. And to me, Bitcoin is this incredible antidote that has come out of the free market that to me, it is freedom. It is hope. And by traveling to other countries, talking to people, meeting them, seeing their use case for it, it solves different problems for different people in different places. And you've got to go and kill every single person in the world that currently uses Bitcoin. And that's just never going to happen. So yeah, very, very bullish long term. And as it's about 15 or so years into its life, I think we're just getting to that stage where within 5 years from now, it'll be widely accepted as like the base case for global currency. We're just not quite there yet. So you need to have seen a few things in your lifetime to suddenly go, maybe this thing does make sense.
And then my final question is,
please,
can it be controlled ever by the central banks, or does it remain decentralized and for the people?
Great question. So I'm always an advocate for like, what did you do? So I don't mind if you have an opinion on something, please share it. If you went and did some work and you figured something out, please share it. You do not need to be an expert, quote unquote, to have a valid opinion. And my view on this is quite simple, which is that there's a brilliant book called The Blocksize Wars. It was written around the 2017 period, and it was all about the size of every block in the blockchain. And it's quite small. And there's only a very small amount of transactions that can get onto each one. And each one is only processed every 10 minutes. And what that means is that the ability for Bitcoin to be a payments network that generates enough payments like a Visa or a MasterCard, it could never do it on the base blockchain, ever, because the block's too small. So there was this big argument about big blocks versus small blocks. And the resounding winner from that argument was that the network participants voted for small blocks. So what this means is that you and I at home with a small amount of computing power can plug in a Bitcoin node. And with that, we then have every single transaction that's ever happened on Bitcoin since 2009. And it makes it incredibly difficult to kill. So I don't know how many Bitcoin nodes are currently live, but it's going to be thousands, like 30, 40,000 around the world. You'd have to find every single one of them and destroy them completely in order to get rid of the Bitcoin network. If one of them survives, gets back online, you can then replicate the entire Bitcoin ledger of what's happened in the past. And so for someone to co-opt it and say that that isn't real, very, 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 very hard. The way I would look at Bitcoin is it is a system of rules in which we are ruled by the rules and not by the rulers. In the fiat system, the bigger the player that you are, the more you can influence the law, the more money you can get hold of, the more that you dictate what happens. And so Bitcoin's the inverse of that. Why couldn't it be co-opted? Well, first of all, to go and change the historical transactions requires you to find every single node and basically update every single one at the same time with what you want. And that costs an insane amount of energy. And this is why it's very important that Bitcoin itself is connected to real world assets. And so Bitcoin miners are these specific things called an ASIC, which is like a hardware device. And they are running on all sorts of different energy sources around the world. And you'd basically have to somehow re-update the Bitcoin nodes with your information, which requires consensus of the whole network. And basically, no one's going to agree. There's too much sunk cost from the players that incentivizes them to actually move in the direction they want. In fact, I'll tie it up with this. Bitcoin is a extraordinary combination of positive incentive alignment, such that I've never seen anything like it in my life. So every single network participant benefits from how they're incentivized to behave. And that, for me, is the ultimate reason why it won't be possible for someone who can print their own money to come in and just co-opt it and then basically get people to do what they want.
Okay.
And again, it's a huge topic, Symmone. So I would highly recommend you to keep digging and to ask the question, what is money? And the fun thing about doing that is it brings a very simple first principles approach to it. And with that understanding, you're then able to make, high conviction decisions.
What a brilliant explanation. Thank you.
No, that's my pleasure.
Yeah, your explanation kind of points to, no, it can't be co-opted. No, central bankers can't redefine or recreate another enslavement system like they have with the fiat system. And thereby we're entering into an age where peer-to-peer transactions and our freedom is now at the forefront, where we have the empowerment and the ability to create a future we want without being controlled or manipulated or in scarcity or in poverty because of the upper echelons of power that deem it so.
Andrew came on my podcast a couple of weeks ago. He's written an excellent book with his mates. He's an academic, so it's highly researched, called Resistance Money. And it's basically a philosophical analysis of Bitcoin that puts you in the shoes of, okay, let's say tomorrow morning you get taken out of who you are today and you get put in the shoes randomly of one of the 8 billion people on Earth. You have no choice who that person is. Let's think about whether or not Bitcoin would be a good thing for that person or a bad thing for that person. And what it manages to do is highlight excellently that having a money that is not possible to be co-opted by centralized figures is a net benefit for the world. Now, I'm not a Russian dissident, but if I woke up tomorrow and I had a problem with the politics of Russia, I'd want to be able to transact in the economy. If I couldn't, that'd be a big problem. Tomorrow, I might wake up as a female in a part of the world where you're not even allowed a bank account. Or maybe I'd like a bank account. And so often I think what it highlights is that the financial privilege of many people that just poo-poo Bitcoin straight away, well, they get access to a credit card, they can get a mortgage, they can go and buy whatever they need. They don't live in a financially broken system. And like I touched on before, 1.4 billion people are unbanked. Well, let's say tomorrow morning you wake up and you're completely unbanked. You'd quite like to be able to get a wallet that can receive money, send money, and store money. And yeah, it's a really excellent book. I'd recommend looking at that, but it's also quite a dense read. It's not the best entry level Bitcoin book. I can send some other ones if you're interested.
Yes, please do. Yes, I'll find out from you after.
Well, I'm getting a call, which means I've overrun in time. Sorry. Symmone, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really awesome learning from you. Last question is, where can people head if they want to get in touch?
The Healing Realm. There's thehealingrealm.org where you'll find the information and my contact details, or I can give you my contact details and you can publish it when the podcast comes out.
Yeah, cool. We'll put them in the show notes for sure. Well, Symmone, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Jake.